I'm super excited as program manager to sort of support this particular conversation. I have not had any prep work with the three organizations that are part of this networking session because I'm also not precious about that. I think I invited them here because I know that they do valuable work in the community, and I also, being an artist myself, know that there are many artists who may not be familiar with the work that they do or may have questions. And so CPAMO started a lot in the beginning with workshops, and how I would execute those workshops, that I would ask a survey, I would ask questions of artists. What are their needs? Is it data? Is it marketing? Is it da 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 da? And I would find different partners within the community and the arts sector to actually execute and facilitate those particular workshops. Over the course of the years, we realized that we were moving away from that a lot. We were working more in training the arts sector and large organizations to do the equity diversity work. And we've been in conversations about how we get back to these particular things. We had an amazing workshop yesterday, and we're having another amazing one today. And so for me, it's this is an amplification of those particular things. And we're in space. I have Marketa Tova from so it is Sova. Tokova. See, there's okay there. Marketa Tokova from Dusk Dances, with whom I have had the pleasure of working with. Amanda Lind from Nightwood Theatre, and April Leung. I'm going to say Leung. I'm Jamaican, I'm going to read things differently. So I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. As you come into the screen, please clarify for me how to pronounce your last name. And April is from Theatre Passe Muraille. The session is pretty much open. It's just to have a conversation with those particular organizations. First, I'm going to give them time to introduce themselves, talk about the way they program, the work that they do, what they're seeing from artists within the sector, and then we'll open it up for a larger conversation as well with those whom are also online. All right, I will start with April.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Beautiful. Hello, my name is April Leung. I think you made a really great attempt at my name, so thank you for doing that. I am the artistic associate here at Theatre Passe Muraille that is based in Toronto. What we prioritize in a lot of our programming is emergent voices in our community and really having a full representation of who we see out there in Toronto and giving them voices and spaces on our stages. I think what's particularly exciting at TPM is that we do have a focus on accessibility. And so we are actively trying to make theater more accessible for all groups and audiences. Our space in particular, we're hoping to gear towards a relaxed venue very soon. And so a lot of our shows and performances will have relaxed protocols. Other than that, I feel like I'm just here and happy to chat with you and to answer any questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, April. And I will also pass it over to the other person online, which is Amanda Lynn from Nightwood Theatre.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I look so big on the screen in the Aki studio right now. All good? My name's Amanda Lynn. I'm the Artistic and Engagement Associate at Nightwood Theatre. Nightwood is Canada's foremost feminist theatre company. It actually started back in 1979 just as a collective when 4 women were struggling to find opportunity in theater. So it started out just as a way to create a space for them to make their own works. And it's changed over the years from being a women's theater company to a feminist theater company. And we're definitely in the process right now of examining, and I don't think this process will ever really stop, but examining what that means to us. So currently, Nightwood supports women and gender marginalized folks. So that includes non-binary, two-spirit, trans individuals. We're a non-venued company. We right now have a temporary office just upstairs in Daniel Spectrum. And so that means we move from theater to theater throughout the season. And I think this season we have 4 or 5 shows happening, and we also have a lot of emerging artist programs that I'm happy to talk about. But maybe that's enough for the introduction. I can speak more about that later. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Amanda, and I'll pass it over to Marketa.
Hi, everyone. Good. Do you hear me well? Hi, everyone. My name is Marketa, and I'm General Manager of Dusk, as Kevin mentioned, and I'm here today representing the festival. For those who don't know Dusk Dances, we are an outdoor festival that presents bands in outdoor parks. And the way how it works is that audiences gather at one spot with an opening band, and there is a host who afterwards lead the audience. It's a traveling event. The audience is following the host and going from one side to another to watch different dance works at different locations of the park. And it starts at the dusk dances, and goes until the early night. And it's been a beautiful event, and we have quite a history. The festival started in 1993, and it was founded by a founder and current festival director, Sylvie Bouchard, who will be actually leaving after next season, after 2023. So we are now starting a big transition. We are looking at things, how they were done, and how we can change them and do them differently. Last year, we piloted a new way of programming, a curatorial program that brought together 3 curators. One was a lead curator, and 2 other people were supporting to have conversations together about curation, about the values, about the other 2, the supporting ones, were sort of a sounding board for the main curator, who was the one making the decisions. There have been a lot of changes in the organization, and we have had a call published recently for choreographers for 2023, which I'm happy to talk about later on. But I'll also end it here for the introductions and hand it back to Kevin.
And I'll continue with you because I'm looking right at you. So you mentioned outdoor parks. What are some of the processes involved in that? Artists are unfamiliar about how their work arrives in an outdoor park scenario as if it was presented by Dusk Dances. What are some of the things that's involved in that?
Thank you for the questions, and actually it's a great bridge to something that we, working in Dusk Dances, feel like, everyone knows how this happens. We've been doing it for such a long time, but for people who have never seen or choreographers who have never been part of Dusk Dances, it may be quite hard. So coming from last year's feedback from Sophie Coutinho, who was the lead curator, we have decided this year to increase the accessibility of the application and selection process to actually organize walks through Wicklow Park. Wicklow Park is the park in Toronto where Dusk Dances take place in the summer, and it will give people opportunity to arrive to the location, to the land, to see the environment, get inspired, and then from there maybe reimagine or adapt or remember the work they have done indoors, but then already start thinking about how it could look at particular places, ask all the questions they might have with Sylvie who will be leading this walk. It is definitely a very different way of creating work because there are so many unknown elements as opposed to presenting work inside a theater. Because you have the weather, there might be obstacles on the ground. Actually, all our performances are relaxed because there is mostly no lighting, and we cannot control people who are in the park. It's happening when people are still enjoying the walk. Kids are playing in the playground, so we have often dogs running through the performance stage. So there are a lot of things that choreographers sort of need to be ready to embrace, and the performers as well.
I should know this by now. I have to give it some time to connect to the system. So thank you for that. I would love to toss it over to April. I have the unfair advantage of knowing and having great colleagues at Theatre Passe Muraille. So I'm curious about when you say like emergent voices and accessibility and like relaxed? What are some of the things involved in that? And if you could also speak about like your blackout night, the ways in which you are actually using and supporting the artists in the work that they're doing and that you're presenting in your space.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for highlighting Blackout Night too. So Blackout Night was an initiative that developed a little while ago. Um, and I don't want to say exactly when because I will not be able to articulate it a correct fact and I don't want to give misinformation here. But it is a night specifically for our Black community, for shows that feature and highlight Black experiences and have a full Black cast and are talking about Black stories. And so it's really to give them a space to feel comfortable to share with others who look like them. And in a historically white dominant art form, it's to give them comfort, space, and just, I think, a gathering time to be with those who look like them. And so that is specifically our Blackout Night. And we often try to have a Q&A as well, and we offer food. And so it's really just allowing folks to feel welcomed into a theater again. And to talk a little bit about our accessibility initiatives in terms of relaxed performances. So it really depends on the show. We often do relaxed protocols. So it can mean whether it's in and out privileges. So if you do need to step away from the show for whatever reason, whether it's to take a phone call, whether it's you just need to use the washroom, you're welcome to, and you will be allowed back into the show. Whether it's back into the same seat or not might depend on the show, especially because different shows have different seating configurations or staging needs, but it's to acknowledge that, you know, like we all have lives that we live. Everyone is coming to the theater, probably with different sorts of baggage from the day. And so it's to allow people to be present when they can, and then to have to step out when they need to, but they're always welcome back. And I'm so sorry, I feel like there's more to your question that I may have already forgotten as I've been spewing along here.
I think you're hitting most of the points that were asked. It was basically around even clarifying when you say emergent voices, what does that mean for Theatre Passe Muraille? Who's included in that? Stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, I think one great thing about a lot of companies in Toronto is that we are part of the Recommended Grants for Theatre Creators program that's offered through the Ontario Arts Council. And so we always call them like seedling grants or like a first baby grant because it's a much simplified process in terms of writing grant and getting funding for your often first piece of work for any writing that you have in process. And so with that, we're able to reach just a larger community of emerging artists who do fit under our like mandate and our values in terms of being a diverse voice in the city, who identify as being disabled or differently abled, whatever that might mean. And so in that way, I think we do prioritize a lot of emergent voices in that way. And we're always trying to reach out to those folks, I think very similar to Amanda from Nightwood as well. And also, emergent. I feel like I was going on a tangent that I thought had an end there, and I swear I do. I just lost it somewhere in the process of explaining that. But yes, in terms of emergent voices too, that we are prioritizing stories that can be seen that will reflect the community out there in Toronto. And so folks that we see on the TTC, folks that we see walking around in the streets, especially in our neighborhood, which is near the Scatting Court and Alexandra Park neighborhoods. Oh my gosh, Rochelle, thank you so much. That's so kind. And it's so lovely to see that you're there. Hello.
And I will read what I see here from Rochelle. I was supported by Theatre Passe Muraille with a theater recommender grant this past year, and it was such a great experience. I felt so supported by this organization and felt they went above and beyond to include me in a way that I did not experience with all of the companies who recommended me. You're doing great work, April. Thank you. And I also want to say that, you know, this is a conversation. So, you know, I know you're representing an organization. I'm looking for those. I'm looking online and in the physical space as well. At CPAMO, we like to just have them be conversations. You don't have to present anything that, you know, you're speaking both as an individual and for an organization. And we have to navigate those things. So I just want to say, you know, thank you. If you miss a point, you can always come back to it.
Totally. Thank you for saying that too. I feel like, especially with being on Zoom and knowing that there's probably so many voices out there that I can't see, I'm like, hello, let me try to answer all the questions that I can. But feel free to, if anybody has any questions, pop them in the chat or have someone ask them. I'm sure, I don't want to speak on behalf of Amanda, but I'm sure all of us here are super happy to help answer any questions that you may have.
And thank you in assisting me in moderating. That's great. Amanda, I want to just bring you into focus for a minute and talk about what do you look for in proposals in present for work, because you, as you mentioned, you're moving. You don't have one solid theater space. So you're moving around different spaces. How do you go through that particular process in terms of saying, well, this is a work that we can engage with in these particular ways because we're familiar with the theater spaces we're going to be engaging in?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I guess first I'll start by saying that Nightwood really prioritizes intersectionality in terms of our feminism. So similar to Theatre Passe Muraille, a lot of the stories that we try to program and uplift and help develop are coming from people that are people of color or disabled and deaf artists, LGBTQ artists, and gender nonconforming artists as well. So that's definitely a big part of how we select the work that we're going to share. So it is partially the representation of the artists involved, but it's also the message of the artists of the works as well. So the way that our work gets programmed at Nightwood is generally from the artistic director with a lot of input from the rest of the team, although we're definitely starting to explore different ways that we can look at programming. Am I still working okay? Yeah, okay. Was worried I was frozen for a second. Yeah, we're looking at new ways to examine how do we program art in a way that might be less hierarchical, but as of now, it's a lot of a conversation with the staff and the artistic director. And there are a number of ways that paths into Nightwood, and we're trying to keep open that up as well. So it's not just like always the same artists that we're interacting with. But a big way that work gets programmed at Nightwood is through our Groundswell and Right from the Hip program. So Right from the Hip is a year-long program for emerging playwrights. And we accept about 5 playwrights a year. And throughout the year, they work with the Right from the Hip program director, who is the incredible Donna Michelle St. Bernard. And throughout the year, they develop a play. And then we have a Groundswell Festival, which actually just closed last week. And those playwrights get to have a stage reading and a workshop of their play. And often a lot of the works that come out of that program either eventually get staged at Nightwood, or we try to connect them with other theater companies that might be interested in presenting their work. But also, I would just say, if you're an artist that's looking to share your work with Nightwood and maybe get support from Nightwood or be programmed, and other ways, again, do the recommender grants, as April was discussing. It's just a really, it's still a grant, but generally low barrier way to share your work with Nightwood and make sure that someone at the company is reading it. And also just getting emails from artists that are like, hey, I'm doing this play. Would you like to come see it? Or would you like to watch this video of my play? Nightwood does accept unsolicited script submissions and is always really super excited to hear about the work that people in the community are doing. So I'd really encourage people to reach out. I'll put the link for our script submission instructions in the chat there. I hope that answers your question somewhat.
It definitely does, yes. I have follow-up questions for both of you, but I want to toss it over to Marketa for a minute. And Marketa, you're in competition with 2 theater artists. So I'm going to encourage you to use your theater voice, because
we're not in competition.
I just have to be mindful that there's an online audience as well, and they might want to hear all the amazing things that you have to say. Could you walk us through a call, an audition, a development of support for someone in terms of dance and how they arrive at being presented by Dusk Dances?
Absolutely. I hope this is a good enough theater voice. I'll do my best, slow down and speak loud. So basically, in order to be presented at Dusk Dances, what it will mean for 2023 is that the artists who are interested, they will have to submit an application. The call has been published very recently, and there is until January 5th for artists from Toronto and GTA to apply. And basically, what we are looking for is a reimagination, a remount, or an adaptation of already existing work. At this moment, often in the past, Dusk Dances has done some commissions, but it is not something that we are looking for 2023. So it needs to be already an existing work that could be longer than 10 minutes, which is usually the amount and the length we are presenting, but it could be shorter. So Sylvie Bouchard will select or will curate together with support Sophie Godinho. So we are bringing back the curatorial model, but we will get pared down. So it won't be just one person's voice, but Sylvie will have Sophie as a sounding board to do all the conversations, to discuss the proposals. Sophie will be able to offer a different point of view, different life experience. So all that will have an impact on the actual curation. And what will happen afterwards is, after all the submissions are received, Sylvie and Sophie will go through them. They will be considering a lot of different aspects of each proposal, because of course some works could be amazing standing on its own, but it also needs to fit the overall program. So there are a lot of things that are happening sort of behind the scenes in curation that will be a better question for Sylvie and Sophie to answer when it comes to their curatorial vision. But the candidates or the selected artists will be informed in March, and then they will know that they have been selected for a festival that is happening in the summer, in August, to the first week of August. What is a little special about Dusk Dance is not just it's being outside, but also it is a long run for dance. We have 8 shows, which is not very usual, except for maybe National Ballet, but we are offering an opportunity for artists to present their work 8 nights in a row. So that gives also the work a little bit of time to really settle down and be the best version of itself. And throughout the spring and summer, choreographers and their performers work on the actual performance on the piece. They can afterwards start rehearsing in the park. We offer often an outside eye from the curators who come and give feedback if it's solicited. And then, of course, Dusk Dances provides all the technical and production help and team and marketing. There's obviously for the artists.
Thank you. I'm going to switch mics. Maybe it's your mic. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I have a follow-up question, and it is, where does one find, if I was a dancer, I'm doing that because I'm a dancer. If I was a dancer and curious about the curatorial vision, is it available online to see if my work meets or matches the curatorial vision of the festival?
Well, I think it might have been actually the mic, but I don't know. So right now the vision is not put out online, but what we are also going to do as a support and additional accessibility piece of this year's selection process, there will be a Zoom call for anyone who is interested to participate or submit their application. A Zoom call with Sylvie Bouchard and another member of staff, Fanny Goraib, who is our artist advocate. And Sylvie will go through the application, through exactly explaining every single point of what we are looking for. And then folks, whoever is interested, can ask their questions. So this gives opportunity to figure out first if they feel like they would be a good fit, and then if it's an environment they would like to be part of. So this question will be definitely something that people can ask at that Zoom. It's a good consideration about putting the curatorial vision online. I think something I'll bring back to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm super excited. April and Amanda, I'm coming to you. And the reason I am is because this morning we had a whole conversation about onboarding and contracting for artists and supporting artists through the process. So to follow through with a networking session, I think it's really beautiful for me because it sort of breaks down some of those particular things that people think about when they think about organizations. Who would have known that there's the Theater Recommender program that both Nightwood and Theater Passe Muraille could support artists with? Who would have known the sort of curatorial purview on feminist work, what is involved in that? I think sometimes as artists across disciplines, we see organizations, we know there's a process to get to them and to maybe engage with them, but we don't understand all of the things that's involved in that. So thank you all for continuing the conversation and just giving us more information that I think many artists out there would need to feel even more confident, especially if they're emerging artists. So like send an email and like come to the door. Forget the emails. If you're emerging artists, if you're established art, go to the doors. I think we're coming back to a time when emails are inundating and you will get a response. Go to the doors, knock, sit down, demand to be seen for 5 minutes, and make personal connections as we emerge out of the pandemic. So thank you. I wonder whom of Amanda and or April would want to talk us through the Theater Recommender grants. And after you do so, I'm going to put Rachel on the spot because she's just so excited about this thing. I've known Rachel for many years, and so I'm being sarcastic. She's laughing right now. I can just imagine it. About being a part of also Nightwood's process that she said she's driving from. So I'd love to have also the experience of an artist amplified in the conversation as well. But either April or Amanda, if you want to talk about the recommender processes for both of your organization, that'd be great.
I can start and then maybe we can do a baton pass. So the Recommender Grants are a program that operates through the Ontario Arts Council. It used to be called Theatre Creators Reserve or TCR. So if you're familiar with that, it's the same program. The way it works is the Ontario Arts Council gives a certain amount of money to many different organizations, theater organizations throughout Ontario. So there's lots and lots, I think maybe, I'm bad at estimating numbers, maybe hundreds. Is that too large of theater companies that participate? I'll drop some links in the chat. But the way that it works is they give this money to these organizations, and then the organizations receive applications from artists that are looking to develop a new work. So the cool thing about the Recommender Grants is that you don't need to really have much else besides an idea. It can really be at any point in the process. You can come being like, I just have this idea that I want to start writing a first draft for, or it could be like, I'm on my third draft and I need support to hire a dramaturg. Recommender grants come between 1,000 and 3,000. So it's a smaller amount, but it's mostly to sustain, you can apply for it just to be sustaining yourself as you write. So say you're an artist that works a full-time job at a cafe or retail or something like that, and you really just want to take some time off from work to write your script, because I definitely know that when you're working full-time, it can be really hard to dedicate any energy to writing. So you could apply for a Recommender grant, get it $1,000, and then use that money to just take some time to write. So that's a totally valid way to use Recommender grant funds. You can also apply to up to 5 organizations. So that's great. You could technically receive money from 5 companies. And some companies, Nightwood has done this in the past. I know Theater Passe Muraille, Cahoots, Studio 180, for example, are some companies that further engage with the people that they give Recommender grants to. And I know for sure, at least Nightwood is really, really interested in hearing updates from people that receive Recommender grants, because it's we've already invested in your work. We want to see where it goes next and how our support has helped you find a new version. Maybe I can pass it over to April to talk a bit more about the actual process, and I'll find some links to put in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I just popped in the OAC website in the chat for folks if you're online and you just want to click that website. So the actual process itself, I believe that there's 2 main questions that you have to answer. And I'm going to read it from the website because I don't know it off by hand. but they're both just like artistic merit questions. So the first one is, tell us about you or your group's overall artistic vision, history, and achievements. So what is important to your work and why? And also if you identify as one of the priority groups, to refer to it here if you so desire. And the second is just, what are you planning to do and what do you want to achieve with this project? So they're both kind of just, I would say, like, are the who, what, when, where, why questions that you would have to answer in terms of your project. And I think it's a really easy way of breaking it down. It's just being like, okay, like, why do I want to do this project? Who am I? What is important that you need to know? Just like the 5 W's and an H, if I'm not mistaken, or is the correct acronym for that. And also to note that between the 2 questions, it's a maximum of like 725 words. So it's really like 2 big paragraphs that you have to answer in terms of for the application itself. I would personally really recommend looking at all of the company's mandate and vision to see which one is appropriate for you and the work that you want to apply for. And so that's just to say for Nightwood, like with a very strong feminist mandate, if you're writing a male-centric work, like maybe don't apply, because then it also takes up one of your like 5 applications that you have, or yeah, so it's just like I would recommend looking at all the company's mandates and figuring out which ones best work for you. And yes, unfortunately for TPM as well, our deadline has passed, but I do know that companies are taking applications, I think, until the end of January or mid-January. So there is still time. Would highly recommend it. And if you have some time over the break, if you just have like a week or something and you feel like you can write out an application, you should do it.
Yeah, and I will add to that too, just also along with what Kevin said about knocking on people's doors, like my biggest grant advice is to like look for the contact and just email or phone with your questions, because people are friendly, and getting to talk through your application, especially if you're a first-time applicant, can be super, super helpful. So yeah.
And to tag on to that, so sorry, I would just really recommend anytime you apply for a grant, if you have any questions, contact the council, because those program officers are there to help you. And I think if they can make your application process a little easier, even just to understand what the questions mean, whether you're eligible or not, would be of huge help. So use the resources that are out there and use the people that are associated with the programs.
Thank you so much. And what I'm taking from that is the idea of like updates, following back with the artists that you've supported, to hear how valuable it was to shift or change in that what you're offering and how you're supporting them in that particular process. Really, really beautiful, as we know that many organizations probably do not do that. So there's also something really beautiful about the appropriate application. As you mentioned, like if you're writing, if the focus of an organization is feminist work and you're presenting something male-centered, you're clearly not going to get it. But as you mentioned, is your application appropriate for the themes or the space in which you're applying for? And thank you for that detailed description on those things. I want to ask the question primarily of those online, because we have dance in the physical space. And so this word theater, if I was a multidisciplinary artist, if I was a dancer, would I be eligible, or should I even think about applying for one of these particular grants, or figuring out how to come knock on your door, because you may not present dance or multidisciplinary dance performances? Could you give a comment on that?
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here. TPM, we're kind of a multidisciplinary like theater company. If you look at our season, it's funny. Marjorie, our artistic director, was saying, she's like, we kind of only really have like 2 or 3 like narrative heavy scripts this year. And it shows in our recent programming. So in the year of the cello, it was very music heavy as well. They were co-creators with Marjorie and Conky is a composer. A cello live music is a whole character in the script. And coming up, we have pieces like Okay, You Can Stop Now, which is dance heavy. And so just to say, please don't limit yourself if you are not a like strict narrative text based creator. I would highly recommend applying anyway. I hope that our season really shows that we kind of do a little bit of everything, and that there's a home for you.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Nightwood does tend to lean more towards text-based work, but also I would say definitely reach out if you have questions about, if you're a multidisciplinary creator and you have questions about whether it would be worth applying to Nightwood's RGTCs, definitely send us an email. I think this is maybe the workshop that Rachel was talking about in the chat, but Nightwood right now is supporting the development of a work that does have a dance component to it as well. And I know there are other theater companies in Toronto, like Canadian Stage comes to mind, that has like some heavy dance programming. So yeah, I guess it just goes back to asking those, asking the people that are the contact folks or the grants, or talking to a program administrator with the councils to ask where's the best fit for my work? Like, because I know there are dance specific grants as well, but it might be, if you're kind of between dance and theater, it might be worth a call to the granting council to be like, here's my project. Like, what do you think would be the best fit for me in terms of getting support for this? But yeah, definitely not a hard no in terms of dance creators applying to the recommender grants for theater creators either.
Thank you so much. Before I invite Rachel to walk us through the process that led to an application and to all these amazing things that she's like raving about in the chat, I'm just going to turn it to Marketa because I am that person. Do we have anything similar in dance, like the Theater Recommender program?
Actually, I think that nothing really comes to mind right now, but I wanted to comment on something that April said about making it clear to people that Theater Passe Muraille can be a home to them. And I think that this is something that we at Dusk Dances have really taken to heart in the past 2 years, trying to provide support and an environment that people can feel like they are part, or folks are part of the organization, because of course our programming changes every year. We have technical staff that is usually different every year. So there is this challenge of making sure that we are all in the same boat, or that we are all part of the same group that is trying to put on a beautiful show for people in the park and in the bring dance to communities, because for a lot of our audiences, this is the first experience of dance and watching dance outdoors in a very different way than they would at the theater. So this has been one of our priorities, I would say, in the past year and a half, to really make Dusk Dances welcoming and accessible and a safe space. I shortly touched on that in the beginning when I spoke about our colleague Fanny Gorayev, who is an artist advocate and social alignment advisor. And it is a role that sort of came to be very organically through conversations between Sylvie, festival director, and Fanny, about how Dusk Dances can be more supportive, more caring, and often in the middle of the season, it's when things are happening so fast, it's very easy to overlook a small issue on a situation. And Fanny is there to support any and all the artists who work with Dusk Dances, to talk with them, to provide a space for conversation, to be heard, to be listened to. And she has been with us in the past season in 2022 and will continue. And it's been an amazing experience, because Fanny also questions the organization. Sometimes when we do things, she comes back and asks us why, and she gives us the opportunity to rethink a lot of when you are producing something, it's just run, and this gives us the opportunity to stop and think and consider and change. So yeah, I think that making the space home for everyone is a really beautiful idea that stick with me.
I'm not waiting enough. I'm excited. Thank you so much. I'm going to do this again because I am that political. I believe I'm a Black man. My art is political. I think if you're a IBPOC person, everything you create is political. And so I'll put a political part into the conversation. Because I do know that there are some of our attendees are from arts councils, and there are many arts organizations out there. What we're hearing is that there's no grant, no support in the dance sector that is similar to the Theater Recommender grant. And so I think there's a need, as we move the needles forward, to begin to think about what that might mean for dance, to begin to have the same sort of support with something like the Theater Recommender grant. And could dance organizations also be the support leaders, the leaders as Theatre Passe, Muraille, and Nightwood are in providing these smaller micro grants for dance artists to develop their work. So I'm just putting it out there, and I'm going to invite Rachel to come into the conversation.
Hey there. What do you want me to talk about, Kevin?
Walk us through the moment when you realized that you wanted to apply for a grant, you had an idea, and what sort of support did you receive? What it meant for you to receive the support? I know you're still in it, but I think hearing also the experiences from an artist would definitely benefit other artists out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was introduced to the Theater Recommender program through an outreach initiative that Cahoots Theater was doing. And also Theater Passe Muraille had one where they just were having a meeting and they were explaining what the process is about, kind of what language you want to use and what their mandates are, which helped to make it more clear for me which organizations would align with me. So it was actually Cahoots who supported me in my first application. And through that, because you get 5, I applied for other organizations as well. And because I am both an artist and I have an organization, I applied for both, which gave me 10. And I resulted in 7 of those, which was great. And allowed me to really launch my company and start creating art on my own terms in rooms that were not rooted squarely in white supremacy. And for me, as a young artist and a mother and somebody who gave birth to my son at the age of 24 and felt very pushed out of the industry as a result, and like I had to choose, this made the difference between me doing something non-arts work or continuing to cultivate my craft in a way that would work for me and allow me to pick up my son from school and still utilize my talents and be a leader in my community. I didn't feel like all of the organizations were actually supportive. Some of them I felt like were using my likeness for performative just virtue signaling to the point where they couldn't spell my name correctly. Even if I sent it to them 3 times, they couldn't invite me to free events that they were having that other more established white organizations in my region were included in. But I felt like Passe Muraille does this huge effort to do outreach for me and send me emails and reminders and invite me to events and ask me specifically what I need from them and give me opportunities to take advantage of that. And I feel like even though my time with them is over and I haven't been able to put through another application this year, that I have them as a resource now. Similarly with the Nightwood show that I've been doing, it's like they actually care about my experience and the people who are surrounding me and making sure that it is not just a diverse room, but an inclusive room where diverse points of view are heard and seen and allowed, and that if I have an issue with anything that's going on, I'm allowed to bring it up without fear of retribution or losing my job, which as an artist puts me in a lot of situations where I will bite my tongue or take on violence and harm because I have rent to pay and a kid to feed. So I feel myself in a place as an artist where I see a lot of performative lip service happening. I got really eager and excited in 2020 when people invited me into the room, and frankly, the harm has not stopped, even to the point where my application with Ontario Arts Council, they said that my Cahoots application was rejected. And when I reached out to Cahoots, they were like, "What are you talking about? We never even saw your application." So that institution actually intersected between me and an organization that wanted to do good work, who I was on the same page with, and perpetuated harm against me that way as well. And thankfully, I had the support of Cahoots to go back to OAC and help to make it right and to give me the grant that we had talked about. But that's what I see as a huge problem, is intersecting with these institutions that are creating this place where they're sort of gatekeeping a lot of how we're going to work together in the industry. That's been my experience so far.
Thank you for that. That was a lot. There's a lot of beautiful, nuanced details in there. This idea of like virtue signaling or intersection of the organization in supporting you when you need to as an artist, with again a funding body, are really beautiful and magical things. You know, and I think what beautiful nugget of information that you provided in that experience, Rachel, is this idea of you're able to apply both as an artist and as an organization.
Yeah.
And you're able to intersect in those two particular spaces as well, which sometimes are never normally the same thing, right? Case in point, I run a dance company, but I'm also an independent artist. And those are not necessarily the same things because I may have a different desire for my independent dance works in comparison to my company's works. So thank you for putting that into the conversation as well. Is there any questions from anyone in the online neighborhood? We're doing that well. We're doing that good? Okay. No questions from me. All right, well, that's good. Is there any question from anyone in the space? Going once, going twice, not yet. Go on. Okay. I wanted to touch on one particular theme, and it is, what are some ways what are some of the things you're hearing from artists as they come to you? And Rachel was beginning to talk about some of these particular challenges of, like, you know, the virtual versus, say, the virtue signaling. And what are some of the things you're hearing from artists that are challenges for them? And it doesn't have to be necessarily with your organizations, but as you're hearing in the sector itself, in the networks that you're in and from, around accessibility to either these particular sessions of networking, professional development, their own growth, and their artistic creations. I'll start with you, Marketa.
I would say that in dance, one of the things I've been hearing most in the past year and a half is access to space and the actual physical space, because there have been a lot of places that shut down during the pandemic and there has been really a replacement. So there is a lot of competition between the artists to actually access the spaces, and for a dance artist, not having the space and not being able to be in the studio, that's definitely something that has been on the mind of a lot of people. And another thing, of course, I think that most of us have been seeing increased. I speak now more from the organizational, but I'm sure that many individual artists experience the same, that the amounts we are getting from funders remain the same since I don't know when, but the expenses have gone up for almost everything. So it's really hard to be able to, we are not able to do the same, we are not able to put up this a season in the same way we were able to do it 3 years ago or 5 years ago, because everything is just so much more expensive.
Thank you. Thank you. And Amanda.
Yeah, one thing that I've definitely noticed through the pandemic too is that there's so many folks, so many young artists, and not just young, but emerging artists that are coming into the field. And it's kind of a time of so much backlog. Like, a lot of theater companies are still working on the things that were in development from before the pandemic that had to get put on pause. And now all these new folks are joining and looking for opportunity, but it's just, there's such a capacity issue with a lot of the theater companies. So something that Nightwood's been doing is, when we have applications, like some of our programs, we get hundreds of applications and we can only really serve so many people before it becomes less helpful to the people that are in the programs. So we often will send out surveys and try to get an idea of what it is that people need. And definitely one of the big ones is community. Like, it's such a time of isolation. People are just looking to meet like-minded artists and to find collaborators. And something that we're trying to sort out, and if anybody here has thoughts about this or ideas, I totally welcome it, is how can we provide these connection opportunities in a way that isn't just a one-time thing of like, you meet these great people and it's so much fun and you have a great time in the moment, but then past that, what actually happens? So we recently during Groundswell had a hive mind is what we called it, session where people just came with a project that they were working on and they had 10 minutes to talk about the project and receive questions and feedback and resources from the other people in the room. And that felt like that was quite generative. But yeah, definitely a question that's on a lot of the staff's minds at Nightwood is how do we not only continue to support artists, but just keeping a mind on our capacity? How can we provide support that allows these artists to be self-sufficient and to be able to like build things not reliant on the company? So that's, I don't know if that like is an answer so much, but that's definitely been, yeah, something we've been thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'll respond to something you mentioned and put out there later, but I'll pass it over to April first.
Would you like to respond now since it's fresh on people's minds?
I wrote it down. But on this notion of community, Amanda, I just want to say that CPAMO we do this twice a year, right? It's the biggest, probably biggest kept secret in all of Toronto. This multi-arts festival and conference happens twice a year in the fall and in the spring. And so if you talk about partnerships, we would love to partner with you to create the spaces, the rooms. Don't even think about it. You send me get very Jamaican. You send me an email, I'm gonna respond to the email, I'm gonna make it happen. So I think, because I do believe it's important and I do think it's needed. So thank you so much for mentioning that, as I took a note about that around like community engagement and partnership, how we work together as organizations in the arts to support the artists and the sector. So that's what I want to say. Over to you, April.
Yeah, I think echoing a lot of people's thoughts and concerns too of just like how are we able to expand our capacity, but also acknowledging all of our staff's capacity, like I think at least at TPM, we all want to do so much, but then also acknowledging that we are only who we are as human beings. There's only so much we can take on. So I think for us, or at least for me, it's figuring out how can we best support the communities that we have without burning out ourselves. And I think one thing that's really great about at TPM is that like, if we work with you, if we fund you, if we support you in any way, it's because we want to continue that relationship. We don't, as Rachel had mentioned, just that we don't just give you money and then take your name or your image and then say like, see you later, like good luck, have fun. Like we really want to continue building those relationships, making sure that you're doing well. And we want to hear from you to know how that project is going. And so with that too, it's acknowledging that we can only help so many people because we want to have those long-lasting relationships. So I think it's, at least personally, it's like how do we expand from that so we can help more people, I think is always the question. And I don't think there's ever a good answer. But with that too, is I think I'm seeing a lot of need in the community of just needing community. Like they need the support, especially think coming out of or still going through a pandemic. It's where do you find the resources that you need to continue creating or making work or doing your craft? And there's kind of no good answer. And if anybody does know the answer, please let me know. And we can, I think all companies want to know so we can make it all happen. Yeah.
Just a quick thought adding on to that, April. I think when you talk about capacity, like one of the challenges is that like a lot of these companies are charities and rely on funding, and a lot of funders really just want to see more and more and more. And the more, it doesn't necessarily equal greater impacts, because that's not like easy to measure. They're more talking like, how many people have you supported? How many people did you get out to buy tickets? So that's definitely something that I think needs to shift, is like, how do we measure impact? Because it might not necessarily be reaching the most amount of people. It's how to have those people actually gone away from the program or the support, and how has that helped their career? But that's so hard to measure, and it's not an easy fix.
For sure. And just to follow, oh, I'm so sorry, Kevin, I'm going to cut you off. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I think too, it's acknowledging that a lot of initiatives that we're trying to do, a lot of access needs that we're trying to address and welcome a different community in, is that it will cost a lot more money, but it's something that we want to do, but it just means that it may take funds away from other things or from expanding things that boards or funders may want to see. So acknowledging that there are things that we are trying to do to expand our community and people that we can bring into theaters, it'll just cost more.
Definitely. Having the privilege of dancing in New York for many years, I would always say what Toronto is suffering from is this insularity of how the ways in which we think about working. So I want to offer that as well. I think also this idea of expanding capacity, I think artists are going through it all the time. And I think a session like this one with so much information is about actually expanding the capacities in that same breath. So thank you for that. What I'm also mindful of is, in clear transparency, I had a whole list of organizations I wanted to engage, right? And Marjorie and I've been since the Cahoots days, working in Jane and Finch, and I wouldn't have taken no. I was like, no, Marjorie. And she was like, I'm at my capacity. And I was like, is there someone in your organization who could speak to these particular things, right? So I think that's also, when we think about expanding capacity, it's how do we also then possibly, if we have other staff members, same with Sylvie, it's like, well, could Marketa speak on this? And she's not the AD, but could they speak on these particular things? So I think I'm also mindful of how within organizations we need to think about empowering those we work with in different ways who may not have, I know you all have formal titles, but could there be someone in the organization who can do some of the work for us? So it's not always our heavy lifting or companies' heavy lifting, but it's also a supportive way of thinking about the nurturing that we all need as arts administrators and people with these titles like program manager, which, that's just what we do every day. We rally people together. So how do we do that some more? So thank you so much for that. I know that there is one question in the house, so I'll.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. Just as I was listening to some of the talk about the funding challenges that, that's the same money, that's same amounts of money from before the pandemic, but everything costs more. And just being mentioned around how, in terms of access, that it requires costs along with it. And that makes me think of, I'm an independent dance and theater artist. I'm based in Montreal mainly, but I'm imagining maybe some of the same challenges are happening here, but I'm working in collaboration with the deaf community. And I'm not fluent in sign language yet. And that means that I need to work with sign language interpreters in the studio. And it's been really interesting trying to navigate that. I still have a cap on the amount of grant funding that I can apply to and get access to, and that a little bit in Montreal, there's access funds that are coming from a separate pool that I can apply to, but a lot of times I have to pull out of the same money to pay these interpreters. And even just morally, their hourly rate is way much more than the artists. And so anytime working with a budget, it's like, how can I, as an independent artist, applying to these grants, like the recommender grant, even if it was for the, if we had something similar in the dance sector, like $1,000 to $3,000 does not allow me to do much if I need interpreters in the room all the time. So I'm curious if anyone else has maybe encountered these issues, or what's maybe the discussion around it, advocating for things at the councils or even within some of your arts organizations, and the way that you support artists that are coming to the table with projects that have a really heavy access need surrounding it. How have you maybe navigated that already, or all of the above? I leave it open.
Thank you, Lita. I see here a message on that from Megan in the chat. It says, I'm not with PACT, but they could be an organization that provides this support to artists that individual theater companies can't. For example, PACT's peer-to-peer session are an opportunity to connect with colleagues who work in similar roles at theaters across the country. Led by peer facilitators, these gatherings offer a casual and conversational forum to share ideas, discuss common challenges, and build on successes. I see also Amanda has placed in the chat that yes, PACT also has an open door program for IBPOC arts administrators. And if you are an independent dancer, I'm telling you right now, you should change it and say you're also an administrator. Because if you write your own grants and you have to balance a budget, you're an administrator. Though not ideal for some of us. I think it's also shape-shifting in many ways. I also want to say that one of my main mantras is as artists or as an organization, as people, we have more resources than we choose to use. So some things to consider when I'm developing work or thinking about work is not just the work, but what is the work about? And I've been able to successfully actually engage with York University Sensorium so that even fund some of the ways in thinking about like documenting through digital transference an African diasporic moving body, which doesn't move like a sort of like, the same way. So that I think there's many ways to think about where money comes from and how you get access to funds. If part of that, maybe when you get a recommender grant, part of it is, well, how and where does this work live? And in what ways does it live? Who do I partner with? Where can I begin to have conversations with different communities? And I often say to many people to think outside of our community that we know. And we might find some interesting potentials and possibilities as well. I'm mindful that we have 2 minutes to the end of this particular panel and then transition through some living skin reels into another showcase performance. Is there any last words from, I'll go with you first, April, and I'll go to Amanda, and I'll end it with Marketa.
Yeah, I don't know if these are last words, but just to quickly address the access funds question that was brought up. We did last year give a recommender grant to someone who is deaf and so communicates through ASL. And I think we gave them some amount between 1,000 to 3,000, but they were also additionally able to access the OAC access funds, which I think gave them additional $5,000 for hiring someone to help them transcribe or whatever it is that they needed. So highly recommend taking advantage if you can. I'm not sure how the Montreal funding body works, unfortunately, but also to really put it in your grant and in your budgets, especially for larger ones in Canada Council or in all the other funding bodies, to be like, this is part of the project that is an artistic requirement. It's not just an access requirement. It's what you need to make that project be the fullest it can be. So fight for it, argue for it, put it in those big budgets. And if it ends up being half your budget, just be like, this is how much they cost. You can even put like an ASL interpreter costs this amount of money. I need 2 a day so they can take breaks, whatever that might be. I would just highly recommend putting it in there.
Thank you for that. April?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just like said the thing and then forgot to wrap up. That's all to say. I'm so excited for you. It's a shame I don't know who's in the audience, but I wish I could just give you a gigantic hug and I hope that you know that there are organizations out there that you will find a space in. I am assuming that this is specifically for IBPOC folks. And so just to know that there are organizations who focus is for you and people who look like you. Especially here at Theatre Passe Muraille, it's funny, we were talking about RGTCs because we kind of don't fund white folks almost. Like it's kind of not in our mandate to prioritize those people. Maybe don't tell people I said that, but that's just to say like, I hope you find the communities that are important to you and to know that there are people out there who are looking out for you and want you to do well and want you to succeed.
Thank you. Amanda?
Yeah, just to quickly answer the access question too, I know this doesn't answer as much on an individual artist level, but and something that Nightwood has done recently is switched it so our access budget is a percentage of our total operating budget as opposed to just like a set amount. So that way it's like, as our budget grows, so does the access budget. And one other thought is that in consultation with Dr. Jess Watkins, something that she really emphasizes is just knowing what you can and can't provide in terms of access, because it is expensive and not everyone has the capacity. So just being honest and transparent about what you can and can't provide is the best way forward, even if it's not as much as you wish you could. And then to just wrap up, I'm going to drop in the chat Nightwood's artist list, which is a newsletter where whenever we have opportunities that open up at the company, we send out an email. So anytime programs have submissions, you'll get an email. And also we include a bunch of opportunities from all over. I'm also going to put my email address in. So please feel free to reach out to me. I know when I was an individual artist, I felt really scared to email people. But then when I started working at a company, I realized like that's the best part of the job. Like I'm not enjoying just like applying for grants. Like I really like when I get to sit down and talk to someone. So yeah, if you have questions for me, I'm sure April and like other folks are also really happy to talk. We could have a virtual coffee. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day. That's my email.
Marketa.
Thank you, Kevin. I don't think I have much to add about the accessibility, so I just wanted to wrap up by saying that I wanted to thank Kevin and CPAMO for the invitation, and it's been a real pleasure to be part of this conversation with April and Amanda, because we usually don't have that much opportunities to connect with the theater folks and other artists, so it's been really inspiring and yeah, great idea for the dance recommenders grant. I think it's a thing from now. So yeah, thank you very much for being here and following us. And if you have any questions or any interest in applying for Dust Dances 2023 as a choreographer, feel free to either look at the link that Kevin shared or reach out to me. My email is in that link, so I'll be happy to chat and help you submit an application and work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.